Today's episode of the WAC Podcast is brought to you by Hercules Tires, the official tire of the Western Athletic Conference. Now here are your hosts, Eric Danner and Rachel Vigil.
We're now joined by Adam Young, the Director of Broadcasting for NM State's Sports Properties in Learfield. Adam, welcome back to the show, our first three-time guest.
Yeah, I'm excited. Happy to do this as always, Eric and Rachel, and thrilled that we have a start date for basketball. So we have something to look forward to now.
Woo!
I know.
Basketball's coming back.
I can't wait.
So Adam, you mentioned the start date. November 25th is what the NCAA has allowed. Obviously, there's a lot of things to figure out there with athletic directors and coaches and schedules and all that kind of thing. Any word yet as to what New Mexico State might be looking at as a potential start date starting on the men's side?
Yeah, I know on the men's side it is completely up in the air. They're still trying to reschedule some games that they had before that November 25th start date. In particular, some of those rivalry games. I know a lot of folks know, but New Mexico State has two big rivals in the non-conference in UNM and UTEP, and they play each twice in the non-conference portion. So that's 4 games right there. But in their first initial draft before this all happened, they were supposed to play some of those games before November 25th. So that's their focus right now. I think first and foremost is trying to reschedule those games and then go from there. I know scheduling's been a nightmare for everyone around the country. We don't know much. Northern Iowa was on the schedule, and as far as I know, it is still on the schedule for a neutral site game in Sioux Falls. And then outside of that, I know they're working tirelessly, the coaching staff, Coach Jant and his crew, trying to put it together, but it's not easy right now. So hopefully we'll have something sooner rather than later.
Adam, I want to ask you, I've seen social media pictures of the players on the courts wearing masks. Is that throughout the entire practice? I know for games, you don't see players wearing masks, but I've seen a lot of pictures of them, just standing around and having to wear masks on the court.
Yeah, kudos to our athletes. They've been really, really good about it. Basketball, soccer, volleyball, baseball, softball, you name it. They're doing that consistently during their workouts, and I think they're kind of starting to get used to it. And knock on wood, but that's a big reason why, there haven't been many cases here among the student athletes. It's been a pretty good month in talking to Mario Mocha about test results. So kudos to the kids, the coaches. They've been very, very serious about this. They want to play, and they know that they need to mask up in order to play. And I think it's just kind of becoming a little bit of normal for them as far as wearing those masks during their practices and workouts.
Adam, it's been almost 7 months now since the WAC basketball tournament was canceled, and obviously the rest of the NCAA sports schedule for the winter sports and spring sports was canceled at that time when the COVID infection really hit the United States. At that time, New Mexico State men's basketball on a 19-game win streak with a very special team. Obviously, some guys have moved on, different team coming back this year, but I got to imagine that they are just itching to get back on the court and back playing again.
They are, and we still have a couple waivers out. So we're still trying to see what team are we going to have when game 1 begins. There's still 2 waivers out, Marcus Watson and Mayan Kerr. And I know Aggie fans are just waiting daily trying to hear any news on those. But the guys are ready to go. It was a different off season, of course, but I know they're happy to be back together. Some sense of normalcy, although, it hasn't been completely normal, but practices have been good. And I talked to Jabari Rice actually this morning. We did a TV interview with Jabari, and he was really excited about having a date. He said that's been really good for everybody, is now you have something to look forward to, whereas before you didn't know much. And now he said November 25th is circled on his calendar, and you have an idea now of when games are going to start and when things will start for real.
You mentioned Jabari Rice. Him and Johnny McCants are the 2 remaining starters coming from last year's team for this year. How do you see them emerging as leaders this season?
I think Jabari's a star. He has all the qualities. We kind of saw glimpses of it last year, and I think a lot of people think he'll be one of the candidates, if not the candidate, for WAC preseason player of the year. And there's a big reason why. I mean, he's hungry. He wants to be great. He's got all those qualities. He can score at a high level. And then as far as Johnny McCants, he just continues to grow and grow. And he's been really consistent during his entire career here. And I remember Chris Gian saying a couple of years ago that he thinks Johnny McCants has NBA talent. And when Johnny McCants is at his best, when he's fresh, when he's healthy, when he's playing at a high level, you can see that on both ends of the floor with Johnny. And of course, he's a local kid, so the fans eat it up here. But those two guys are a big part of what the Aggies will try to accomplish this year, because they did lose a lot. They lost a lot of scoring. They lost a lot of defense. Last year was so weird with all the injuries and everything, but it finally came together in the end. But Rice and McCants, those are the two names that I think when people talk about the team for this upcoming year, at least to start the season, those are the two guys that people will be talking about the most.
We're talking with Adam Young, the play-by-play voice of New Mexico State men's basketball with their television games, and also does women's basketball as well. We'll talk about that a little later in this podcast. Adam, you mentioned some of the holes New Mexico State has to fill with that great team they had last year. I guess that starts with Trevelyan Queen, who Rachel had a chance to talk with on WAC All Access as he gets ready for the NBA draft. He's actually got a chance to play at the next level. And maybe initially when he started at New Mexico State, that might not have been the case. Is that fair to say, Adam?
100%. And I think maybe the knock on him a little bit with scouts is he doesn't have a ton of Division I tape, because if you recall, his first year he was a mid-year transfer, so he wasn't eligible until semester. And then this past year he got close to a full season. He was hurt at one point, and then of course at the end the pandemic shortened the season at the end. But he's a star. I mean, he's got all the NBA intangibles. He's long, he's athletic, he's a 6'6" guard. Defensively, he could really wreak havoc because of his ability to get in passing lanes. And his vertical leap is there, his jump shot's there. He looks like an NBA player, and he plays like it. And when he was at his best, I mean, he was unstoppable, and he played with so much emotion and energy. And he was a huge part of that championship team 2 years ago, and he was a huge part of the regular season championship team last year. So just in kind of researching and looking up mock drafts and that kind of stuff, he's showing up on a lot of mock drafts. So I think he has a shot. I have no idea if he's going to get drafted or not, but I think even if he doesn't, I think he'll get a free agent shot somewhere. And I do think if somebody gives him an opportunity, he'll make the most of it.
AJ Harris applied for an extra year of eligibility after dealing with some injuries last year. He was denied that extra year. Did that come as a surprise to you at all?
A little bit. I do a weekly podcast with Mario Mocha, the athletics director. So I was getting the weekly updates, and Mario said from the beginning, this is going to be a little bit of an uphill battle. This is not going to be the easiest waiver to get. I felt bad for AJ because, he had such a hard finish to his career with all the injuries, and to get injured twice last year. And I don't know if a lot of people knew, but he was probably going to play in the WAC tournament and or the NCAAs. He was probably going to be out there. He was getting really close, and he rehabbed so hard. So I feel for AJ. And then, I think it is a different team if AJ Harris is healthy and he's out there. But the Aggies do have Evan Gilliard, who was undefeated last year once he started playing on the floor after he was eligible at semester. The Aggies did not lose. They brought in a 4-star in CJ Roberts. They're in a good position at that point guard spot. Jabari Rice can play there if he has to. He did last year. So they're pretty deep anyway. Chris Jans was preparing to be ready in case AJ did not get that waiver. But the biggest takeaway for me, Rachel, honestly, is I feel for AJ, because I saw him rehabbing every single day, and I saw the effort he put in, and I wanted him to finish his career the way he wanted to finish it. I don't think it finished the way that he wanted it to end.
Well, the two other players from the starting lineup that New Mexico State has to replace are Ivan Urico-Achea and Terrell Brown. Certainly, Ivan was a glue guy and did a lot of the dirty work, got a lot of rebounds, but also had some offensive game. And Terrell Brown was one of those guys that could score 20, 25 on a given night.
Yeah, both are going to be really hard to place, and I think Ore Coachea probably the biggest loss, and Chris Jans has said that. I mean, the numbers weren't like eye popping. He never averaged 12, 13, 14, 15 points per game, but he was so steady. And I think the attention that he drew in the post helped out the guards get better shots from the arc and so on and so forth. So now Johnny McCants has an even bigger role than he had before. And a name I think from the start that you're going to hear a lot about this year is Will McNair, who was on the roster last year. He was a redshirt freshman a year ago. He didn't play a ton, but every time he came out there, it was like, okay, I think in a couple of years, he could really, really be good. And Chris Jans has raved about him down the road. Will McNair could be a star. Well, Will McNair needs to step up this year. And from all indications, he's looked really good. So I think Will is a big part of replacing Yvonne down low.
You mentioned McNair. Who else do you see being or making a big impact this year?
Well, they have so many transfers, and the roster is flooded with four-star recruits. Now, guys have come here from different directions. It wasn't directly out of high school, but Marcus Watson was a top 50 recruit, top 40 in some publications, coming out of high school in Buford, Georgia a couple of years ago. He transfers in from Oklahoma State, and I think he's going to have the ability to be one of the best guards in the WAC. I don't know if it's this year. It might be down the road, but he's 6'5", he's thick, he can shoot it, he can defend. He's going to be a star. Mayan Kerr transferred in. He's been at South Florida, LSU. He's long, he's athletic, and he's another guy who will have to fill in there in the front court. So those are just a couple names. I think CJ Roberts, who was a four-star out of high school, he's going to have to play some minutes behind Evan Gilliard at the point guard position. And then people probably forget that Clayton Henry was hurt all but 2 games last year. And Clayton Henry, going into the year last year, Chris Jans said he was one of the best players on the team and was probably the best perimeter defender. And now he's healthy, and you can insert him in the lineup now as well. So I think he'll probably start from day one. And they're deep. I don't know if they're 12, 13 deep like they were a couple of years ago, but they're deep again.
Well, another guy that we've read a little bit about, Adam, is Donnie Tillman, transferring from UNLV. Played there last year, was a starter, played at Utah, was Pac-12 Sixth Man of the Year at Utah. This guy comes with a lot of fanfare, 6'7", 225, a big body. What do you know about Donnie Tillman?
Well, you said it, big body, and he can play numerous positions. He can play the guard. He can play the forward spot. And I think if the Aggies want to go a little bit smaller, he could play the 4 and they won't lose a beat. But like you said, I mean, he played at a high level at Utah, and then, of course, was at UNLV. And Chris Jans has had success with one-year transfers. Remember Zach Lofton in Chris's first year? Zach Lofton came in and he averaged 20 a game. Now, I don't think Donnie Tillman's going to average 20 a game, but I think Donnie Tillman will make a big impact in this program from day one. He's experienced. He's been through the battles. He's been through the wars already. So he's another piece to the puzzle. I mean, there's so many guys that it's really hard to predict who's going to play 20, 25 minutes, who's only going to play 10 to 15. And that's good to have. When you have depth, you can do a lot of different things. And Chris Jans likes having depth. He doesn't like having a rotation of 7 or 8 guys. He likes having a rotation of 11 or 12. And if they're healthy, knock on wood, I think he'll have that again this year.
You mentioned a lot of 4-star recruits in this program. Besides the winning record, what makes head coach Chris Jans' program so intriguing to players?
I think it's they win a lot. I really do. I think 83 wins in 3 years. That's a pretty good place to start when you're recruiting. They go to the NCAA tournament, what seems like every single year. And kids want to play in the biggest games on the biggest stage. And if you come here, you're going to have a good shot of doing that. Evan Gilliard transferred in from UTEP, and he said he wanted to play for Chris Jans and he wanted to win basketball games. And Evan comes in and he doesn't lose once he's on the floor. So winning is fun. It's contagious. The crowd is a big part of it. This town loves basketball, and it's got a storied tradition. And then, the final thing too is Chris Jans and his staff, they can really, really recruit. And part of that is, too, Rachel and Eric, is when they're recruiting a young man, they're going to be completely honest with them. Nothing is handed to you here. It never is. They don't guarantee playing time. You earn it every single day in practice. And Evan Gilliard said this morning when we interviewed him, he said, I'm a better player here since I came over from UTEP, but I'm also a better person. Chris Jans has helped make him a better person off the floor as well. So the expectations are high. They demand a lot out of the guys on and off the floor, and it shows when they leave here. They leave here better people as well.
Well, this is our New Mexico State basketball preview on the WAC podcast. And Adam, we're going to talk some women's hoops when we come back.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
We would like to thank our sponsors of the WAC Podcast, Hercules Tires and Adidas. Now, back to Eric and Rachel.
We're now talking New Mexico State women's basketball with Adam Young, the Director of Broadcasting for NM State Sports Properties and Learfield. Adam, women's basketball, not the season they were looking for last year. They went to 12-18. What's it going to take? First losing record since 2014. What's it going to take to turn things around for the Aggies this year?
Well, I look back at the schedule the other day from last year, and I forgot how many close games they lost, to be honest, Eric. There were a lot of games that could have gone either way, especially in non-conference play. They got off to a really slow start. They finished strong. They won 3 of their final 4, and we had this feeling in Vegas that they could make a serious run. They beat UTRGV the day before the tournament was canceled, and they felt good about their semifinal matchup against Kansas City. So they finished strong. I'm hoping that momentum can kind of carry over into this year. They lose a big-time scorer in Gia Pack, and that's the biggest question mark, I think, going into this season, is how do you replace 18, 19, 20 points per game that you knew you were going to get from Gia pretty much night in and night out. So that's the biggest hole to fill going into this year.
Who do you imagine can fill her spot?
Honestly, Rachel, I think it's going to have to be balanced. I just don't see them having one player averaging more than 15, but I think they have the ability to have 4 or 5 averaging around 9 to 13. They have capable scorers. Aaliyah Prince has done it, and she's done it at a very high level. Sophia Inusa, who was a freshman last year, showed flashes of scoring at a high level. I don't know if she's ever going to be a Gia Pack who averages 20 a game, but she does so many things well. So those are 2 names right there. Amanda Soderquist, really good shooter from the arc. If she gets on a roll, she could score 20 on a given night. So they have the pieces. I just don't think it's going to be one player every single night. I think it's to be more of a balanced effort.
Well, you mentioned, losing Gia Pack, one of the all-time greats there in New Mexico State, but there are 4 players who are returning starters for the Aggies, and they did have to play that pretty long stretch at the end of last season after Gia got hurt and try to figure things out with her down the stretch. I would imagine, if you want to, make a positive out of a negative, that would be it, that the players are used to playing without Gia.
That's a really good point, Eric. I think that's an underrated part of what they got to see towards the end of last year is Gia was out for around a month. And during that stretch, Sophia Inusa really stepped up. And I saw Brooke Salas her entire career. So I was here when Brooke was a freshman. And Sophia is one of the few freshmen in program history that started right away. Brooke Salas was the same. And I got to watch Brooke grow her 4 years, and she was leaps and bounds different in her final year. I think we're going to see the same type of stuff with Sophia Inusa, where she can impact the game on both ends of the floor. And she was college ready from day one. So I think she could be a future star in this league for sure. And, she's going to have to pick up some of that slack that's lost with the graduation of Gia Pack.
You mentioned Brooke Salas, her and Gia Pack, Aggie legends to the fans out there. How do you rank them in the WAC or in the Aggie history books?
Man, Anita Maxwell's the name that everybody brings up, and she's the top scorer in program history. I never saw her play, but people say she was the real deal. I think without question, Brooke and Gia both are top 5, without question. And you can throw in some other names that we saw, a few years prior. Sasha Weber was elite Mariah Mack was really, really good. I mean, this recent stretch of, I guess, about 6 years, there's been a lot of really good players to come through this program. And there's probably, I would say, at least 4 that you would say are top 10, top 15 players in program history. And yeah, Brooke Salas and Gia Pack are right up there, especially points wise.
We're talking with Adam Young. And Adam, when you look at this year's team, I know there's probably not as much information as there are on men's teams, on the women's team, but who do you see potentially making an impact in their first year for Brooke Atkinson, who's now in her 4th year as the head coach?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of new pieces, but like you said earlier, there's also a lot of returners. And I think a name that people probably forget about because she missed all last year with an injury is Kaylee Atkinson. 2 years ago, Kaylee Atkinson made huge plays in the WAC title game at the Orleans Arena, and then she injured her knee last year and missed the entire season. So she's not a first-year player, but she hasn't played in a couple years. And Kaylee Atkinson can make jump shots, which the Aggies sorely missed last year. And she fits the Brooke Atkinson defensive philosophy of forcing turnovers, getting in passing lanes. She's long, she's athletic. So I certainly think she's somebody to watch from day one. And then we'll see which newcomers can crack the lineup, because there's about 8 or 9 that played significant minutes last year that you would think would be playing similar amount of minutes this year. So I think time will tell if some of those newcomers can crack the lineup. And it also depends, too, on how deep Brooke Atkinson will go this year. So time will tell. And, we have a start date. So the season's approaching sooner rather than later.
We're all pretty excited for that November 25th date, hopefully. And this year is going to look a lot different for women's basketball and for men's basketball in the WAC. Kansas City, CSU, Bakersfield, gone from the WAC. They've moved on to their own separate conferences. Where do you imagine New Mexico State at in the women's side in the conference standings?
Well, I think without Kansas City and without CSUB, this impacts the women's side more, in my opinion. Kansas City with Billy Donlin, they were really improving on the men's side. And, of course, Rod Barnes did a great job on the men's side. But on the women's side, Kansas City was taken off. J.C. Hoyt was doing such a good job with that program. And if you looked at the standings in March every single year, you can almost pencil it in. Greg McCall was going to have his team in the top 2 or 3, and they were going to make noise in Vegas. So the conference on the women's side, I think, is a lot more wide open now. I still think the Aggies are the team to beat. It was somewhat of a down year last year overall, but they were still 9-9 in the league and still, made an impact in the league. We'll see how things shape out this year. But, they've still won a lot of titles in the last 5 or 6 years. So I still think they're the team to beat.
Well, Adam, with Tarleton and Dixie State both coming in from the Division II ranks, we saw this a few years ago with California Baptist, where, maybe they were taken a little lightly initially. In fact, the last men's loss by New Mexico State was that first game California Baptist played in the WAC. I don't know if it was a case of taking them too lightly, but, when you don't know about a team, that can make it maybe a little tougher, especially the first time they play.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. I think it's always interesting when you bring in new schools because you don't know much about them. It's interesting for the media, but it's, really interesting for the coaches. And it's kind of like a non-conference game because you don't know much about the history of the program. Neither team does. So that'll be interesting to see how they kind of fit into the league this year. But, I certainly think the losses of CSUB and Kansas City, it's impacted more on the women's side as far as the top of the conference is concerned. And we'll see what those 2 new schools do here in year 1.
Adam, my last question for you is a personal one, and I ask player this all the time about what's your favorite matchup to go against, but what is your favorite matchup to call? Let's start on the men's side.
Oh, boy. I heard this question with Trev earlier in your interview with Trev. I think it's the GCU game. If you're talking about conference, I do think it's the GCU game. There's a lot of fanfare around it. There's no love lost, I guess you can say. And, the 2 programs certainly have it out for each other a little bit. And the fans care more. It just always seems to be the game where there's more people there. And Other schools in the WAC don't get to experience this, but if you're an Aggie, it's Aggies, Lobos, Aggies, Miners. There's nothing quite like that on the non-conference side. But as far as the WAC, it's definitely Aggies, Lopes. And but the game I think last year that I was most excited to call was the Aggies and CBU in the finale. And I still don't know what happened in those 40 minutes because that's not the way I expected the game to go. But that game was interesting. It was intriguing. CBU is an up and coming program, and Rick Croy does a good job with that program. So that to me, I was pumped up, and then the game was over within the first 5 minutes. But Aggies Lopes, I think for sure in most sports, not just basketball.
Well, last thing for me, Adam, would be somewhat of a personal question, I guess, as well. In terms of, do you know what you're going to be doing traveling wise this year? We've talked a lot about, coaches, players, COVID testing, all that good kind of stuff. But as far as a broadcaster goes, usually on the road with the team, as much as the coaches are, do you have an idea what your travel schedule might look like?
Yeah, we do not. Honestly, I think we're kind of going step by step at this point. We're trying to launch our coaches show at Rudy's Barbecue starting October 21st. So we're kind of like focused on that date now. Can we launch? Can we start on that date at the restaurant because of all the restrictions in the state and stuff like that? And then on the TV side as well, I got emails flooding in. These are our safety protocols for the TV truck this year. So we're focused on that as well, where how many people can we have in the television truck? What are all the rules and regulations? And when does the crew get tested and all those types of things? It's a different year, but we're doing our best over here to kind of plow through it and still tell the stories of these great student athletes that have been affected by this greatly. And then hopefully we can, start without a hitch, and we can have games on TV without a problem. And we can get back to some sense of normalcy. I don't really know what that is at this point because it's not going to be normal, but I'm excited for something to look forward to. That was a cool day, I think, for everybody, just to see there was a date, and then hopefully soon we'll have a schedule. And then it's like, okay, you can pinpoint dates and think about what those games could be like and get back to what we love to do. I mean, I haven't called a game since, I can't remember the day. I think it was March 7th or something. And I'm itching to get back to it.
Well, Adam, we're certainly itching as well. It's always great to talk to you. We have our, we enjoy a lot of people that we have on the show, but you're the first 3-time guest, so you can check that off on your resume now.
Dubious honor. Great to see you guys, even though it's virtually. I hope to see you guys soon in person at some point. And always good to be on the WAC podcast, Eric and Rachel. Thanks for having me.
All right, that is Adam Young, Director of Broadcasting for NM State Sports Properties in Learfield. Thank you for listening to the WAC podcast. We'll have more on each team in the WAC in the upcoming weeks.
Thanks for listening to the WAC podcast. Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And check out our website at wacsports.com.